All right. Oh, that is the monitor in front of everything. Late? What do you mean late? I started the stream. I had the Yeah, I had a bit of an ADHD morning, if I'm being honest. Put things down, forgot where they were, couldn't find them, had to find them. Yeah. I see how it is, Minor. Can't even have the starting screen up. Doesn't count. All right. I am not reviewing a PR on stream this morning. So let's get rid of that. Although I am doing this later. We are not doing it. Whoa. We're not doing Advent of Code this morning either. Let's get rid of that. Advent of Code yesterday was wild. You had to find this random image, which was not well described at all. That's just regular Bevy. Here's our game. Move this all the way over to the right. Do some light desktop reorganization. All right, we are at... I don't know what this malloc stack logging thing is. I need to figure that out. You never understood Advent of Code. Advent of Code is basically puzzles. That's what it is. It's really actually... Where's my Chrome window? I don't have a Chrome window. We need a Chrome window. How are we supposed to be on the internet without a web browser? This is Advent of Code. Basically, there's 25 problems, part 1, part 2. You click into one, it gives you a word problem to start with. But really the thing is you get this input and you get some answer you have to give. I don't know where the answer is, 11 for that test input. You write a program against that test input and the answer, and then you go get the real puzzle input, which is much longer or whatever. And then you get the real answer, which is much bigger or whatever. So that's Advent of Code. There's a lot of like little tricks that go on. But today we're doing Bevy stuff. We're not doing Advent of Code stuff. So the game is working. I did a little bit more kind of like work to see what I would want from these boxes and stuff. So see, I think I have Blender open. Can't turn off malloc stack logging because it was not enabled. I'm definitely not doing that. I don't know where that's coming from. Maybe I need to do a Mac OS upgrade at some point. But I created a library scene in my Blender project. So now I have this crate. I have this, I don't know, low table. I don't know that I'm going to keep the low table. That's a backup. And then this is the textured low table. How do you scroll? There we go. All these textures are substance painted onto the materials, which is cool. Because this is like 2 meshes. So a mesh that contains all the legs and a mesh that contains like the surface setting place. But what you can do when you do Substance Painter, which is a texturing program for those that don't know, is you can apply materials in Blender to, let's say, different faces, for example. So this is table center material. This is the accent material. And then there's like a body material or like a base material here. And that's applied like per face, more or less. So when you export and you import into the other program, it reads those in, and then you can do texturing per material, which is very cool. And that all comes into Bevy, and that all works. So if I remember what to type, then we end up with this little table in here. Same thing for these boxes and crates. Although the crates are a little bit different. The crates are actually a 2-piece mesh, and I don't know that I'm going to keep them that way. So there is I didn't make it 2 meshes, I guess. I thought I did. Let's go into layout. Yeah, I guess I didn't. So all I did was create different materials for these different things. So the faces have one material, and then all of the edges have another. And you can see it's fairly low res in the preview. But if we go into shading, all of that is just the textures. Which I'm not expecting you to like see the textures in here, but just wanted to point out that they are hooked up. And there's 2 materials on this one. So when this comes into Bevy, let's see if I can display this easily here. Crate. I think we've got crate cube mesh .0 would be the right position to put that on. So things come into Bevy as like entities, right? And when we split everything up like this and we start assigning materials to subsections of the mesh, if we reach onto those entities, they are actually separate from the other stuff. So if you place the colliders, say, on just like the sub mesh that is the faces, then the faces have the colliders and the rest of the things don't, and the face mesh stuff just moves away. Which is actually pretty cool. But I'm putting the collider on the root entity that holds all of that stuff. So instead of having individual whatever, it does the entire box. And obviously the wall doesn't have any collision on it. I don't even think I'm going to keep that wall. That wall looks like way too realistic for like the stylized game I want to go for. How are y'all doing this morning? I think we can get rid of, let's see. What do we get rid of? I think we can get rid of this like fake control walk thing that we're doing. We don't actually need to update the player raycast, do we? We did some raycasting debugging. I did file that issue. So the red line here is the faulty debug from Avian. Avian issues. So I did file it. So it is, I assume that somebody is aware of it. But I don't know what the actual issue is. I gave them the information that we found on stream last week. But it is just the visualization, so the raycasting actually does work. And we do have the correct visualization for like this black line. So I think I'll just keep around this debug, this like custom debug function. Oh, actually, you know what we can do? We can get rid of this too, now that I think about it. We're never going to have an infinitely long cast. So we aren't going to need this or that, because when we set up our raycaster, I think we can do with max time of impact and set that to something ridiculously large. So I think a max time of impact of like 10,000 probably is way longer than we need it to be. What are you making? Game. Right now, the game is just picking up boxes and putting them down. So now we have a correct visualization for our raycast. The raycast being the first step in figuring out whether you can pick up a box or not. Because like it has to collide with the box and you have to be close enough, that kind of thing. So we'll probably actually limit that time of impact. Man, it is not chilly in here. So these boxes are the ones that I want to pick up. I want to put them on top of the little like fake character we have. We haven't built a character yet because we don't have... I mean, we have a character controller, but we don't have the input crate that I want. It's not updated to 0.15 yet. Leafwing input manager. Merged 10 hours ago. Prepare for release. Did we get it this morning? Yes, I think we got it this morning, actually. We can actually use that today. Nice. Leafwing input manager. Bevy sounds super interesting. I always watch your weekly videos about the updates, but you just don't have the time right now to get into it. Yeah, that's exactly what those videos are for. Honestly. Like, a lot of people don't have either the time or whatever to, you know, use Bevy for something, or they don't have like the use case for it, you know, but they're interested and they would like to keep up. So that's what that video is for sure. Even people working with Bevy, like work in subsections of Bevy. So that video is also for people who like, I don't know, work in one subsection and just aren't quite aware of everything going on. I think it's useful for a lot of people. There's a lot going on in Bevy and it's very easy to like not keep track of everything because it's kind of a full-time job to keep track of everything. Like the amount of work Alice puts in is huge. I guess I'll keep the dehumidifier on. So Leafwing got a release. It unfortunately didn't get a successful docs build. That's unfortunate, but I do want Leafwing. Let's see. Are we using Perf UI progress? Looks like iOS progress got a point release. I don't think Avian got a release yet. Not really anticipating that it will. I mean, it'll get a release for 0.15. That's not what I meant. I just don't think it'll get a release this week for 0.15. ECS definitely sounds a lot better than whatever Unity's OOP mess does. I remember it was like hell to manage even a slightly complex project. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of, I think, object-oriented programming as like a large-scale architectural thing. But, you know, it's a tool. How much storage would you say is the minimum if you're going into Bevy Dev? You mean like disk space storage? Like if you're building a Bevy project, how much space does it take up on disk kind of thing? I don't think you could get less than I actually question whether they sell computers with less than like 128 gigs. So I guess if you're, you know, doing, well, I don't know what you're doing with the computer, right? My suggestion is always get the most disk space you can, because For example, for like Mac laptops, you can't upgrade it. So if you think you're going to need, 128, I'd get 256. If you think you're going to need a terabyte, I would get 2 terabytes. Because you can't change it, and disk tends to be cheap, although on Macs it's not really. If you have something where you can upgrade the storage and you don't mind upgrading storage in the future, then it doesn't matter. I give a short explanation of what I'm trying to do right now with Bevy. Yeah. So I'll run the game here. We just started stream, so I haven't really done anything today yet. But basically the idea here is 0.15 for Bevy came out last week. Something like that. And I want to build a game for 0.15 for that cycle for like the next 3 months or so, right? I want to keep the game fairly simple, right? I want to start with like a mechanic and build up from there so that I don't try to build, some huge Metroidvania, roguelike thing. Because that would take forever. And my goal is to have like a game within 3 months, and I really only work on this game specifically on Saturday mornings. So about, 3 hours of stream time every Saturday is the extent of time investment this game is going to get. So the goal is to kind of get to like a situation where I can put up a Steam page for it if I wanted to, maybe make a fake Steam page, that kind of thing. And the game itself right now, the core mechanic is going to be 3D, moving your character around, and you're going to be able to pick up these boxes, and it's going to be vaguely physics-based. I don't really have thoughts beyond that. I mean, like, I have ideas beyond that, but I don't want to get into, like, too much beyond that because I don't want to blow out the scope before I've even done basic mechanics. So the next step for this game, or the next step for this game, and what we'll probably work on today, is this raycast that's happening on the character has to hit one of these boxes, and then based on that, we'll try to put the box on the empty from Blender that is on top of the character. So you will have picked up a box, and then you'll be able to like put it down or something like that. So that's the idea for today. I'm just doing a cursory review of the dependencies that we've been using before I do that, because some of them I'm using from Git, which I don't anticipate updating Tenua or Avian right now, because I don't think Bevy Tenua Avian 3D has got a release. Tenua does, but the Avian, because Avian doesn't have a release, Tenua Avian also doesn't have a release. But I just wanted to give a look at like Leafwing Input Manager, which is one of my favorite input crates for Bevy. Because this will enable us to have like mouse and gamepad control, which I feel like is very useful. And as we get into like actually building out player control mechanics, I want an abstraction between like the input button pressed and the action somebody's trying to take in the game. So that might have been a long explanation, but that's that's what we're doing. Yeah, SSDs, I always suggest getting more than you think you need. If you're trying to save money, obviously get as little as you feel like you can afford or whatever, But yeah, for me, my laptop currently has 2 terabytes, but that's mostly because I do video stuff, not because I do game stuff. Video ends up taking up a lot of space, like a lot of space. Especially like I'm making a video at least once a day right now for this month. And I'm just constantly hitting like disk space issues. But yeah, I mean, Bevy is not going to like need more than a couple gigs, maybe tens of gigs if you're like doing constant rebuilds and stuff. Um, let's see. Can I do dust on target? This is probably going to be huge because, yeah. So my target directory right now is 20 gigs. That's fairly large, I feel like. But I can clean that out whenever I want to. So I definitely trade off disk space for speed of development. But yeah, it's up to you. So like 20 gigs, even like doubling, tripling, quadrupling that for whatever reason, which really wouldn't happen, you're still within 128 gig SSD if that's what you're using it for. So I wouldn't get 12 gigs, but I think I haven't looked at low end SSDs in a while, but I feel like 128 is something you can get on a USB for 20 bucks. What exactly can you clean? This whole target directory. So there's a thing called cargo clean, which I don't really want to run because it'll blow away my whole target directory. But all of the build assets, right? All of the incremental build assets, all of the things that make your, like when I run cargo run right now, this happens within a couple seconds and the game is booted and running, right? So that is only possible because of all of the stuff in the target directory. That's what you would clean. Cargo clean means you get lunch next time you build. Yeah. Exactly. Like it's a cargo clean will cause you to do like a fresh, complete rebuild. You're expecting 300 gigs? I mean, I guess if you have like a bunch of games that you're working on, right? And you're pulling down repos all the time. Like my GitHub directory tends to fill up to 100 and something gigs, like low hundreds, like 115 before I clean it. But that's across all things that I'm doing, not just Bevy. How long have I been in the Rust environment? You mean like in Rust in general? I want to say like 7 years. Like 2017 probably is when I started learning. So yeah, like 7, 8 years at this point. I remember working on a C++ project that had 150 gigs. Yeah, that's a lot. I am very thankful for Cargo, is one thing I'll say. To be fair, your MacBook Air M3 compiles Rust LFS. Yeah, the Macs are great at compiling Rust. I'm on an M1, so I'm a few versions out of date, but generally very happy with the compile performance on Macs in general. I think my uptime on this computer is also like 2 or 3 months at this point, so I should probably reboot. Last time you tried Doom Solarized Dark High Contrast theme and you're quite liking it. Nice. Yeah, I used Solarized a long time ago. I switched to Night Owl, which is what you see here. All of this is Night Owl. So this is VS Code on the right. This is New Shell and Alacrity on the left. I have a Night Owl theme in Zalige now. Big fan of Night Owl. But I used Solarized Dark a long time ago, back when I used TextMate, which was like a decade ago. Let's not talk about it. What was I doing? Right. So we've got apply controls here, and right now our controls are kind of like arrow up, arrow down, etc. I think I want to get Leafwing Input Manager in here, because this feels like the right time to put it in. And then we'll get into detecting this raycast and trying to put this crate on top of the character. So this raycast doesn't... So this is the system that we wrote that has all the hits for this raycast. We will probably need to do something like mark objects you can pick up with a component tag, like a marker component, so that when these hits happen, then we can check to see if it has that marker component, and if it does, well, actually, we'll probably only raycast for things that have the marker component, but yeah. So let's get cargo add Leafwing Input Manager. And I haven't looked at any of their examples for 0.15, so I don't know if anything changed yet. Single player, action state, input processing. Let's do minimal, I guess. I don't really want minimal per se, but I instantly subbed as soon as you watched the Advent of Code setup. The way you explained it is quite impressive. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad it was useful for you. I do Advent of Code every year. It's kind of a huge investment for me to do every year. It's, you know, a couple hours of video production and problem solving every day for about 25 days. So I'm glad people find it useful. Okay, so we need this and we need to add the plugin. Unfortunately, my browser doesn't let me have multiple cursors. I think I'm going to leave this debug. No, I'm not going to leave this debug. I'm going to get rid of the debug. We don't need the debug. We have our controller. Debating whether to put this in a plugin or not. I feel like I should, but I haven't done anything in plugins yet, so maybe we don't. Leafwing has a prelude, so we'll pull that in. Which means we'll be able to put the plugin here. And this action is just like a user generated enum with some derives on it. So action like comes from Leafwing. Now we have run and jump as actions that you can input into a game. We don't have any controls powering them, but we do need to spawn, or not spawn, but we need to insert the input map onto the player. So where is our player? Our player gets spawned in individually. So we can just lock this in here. We've got a bunch of stuff on our player right now, including like our character controller and some physics stuff and things like that. So we're just going to drop in the input manager bundle here. I haven't labeled this with a marker component, so I think we are going to create a player component here. And then that's not level, this is character. And then our input map, in this case, it just has like jump and space, which I think we can use to drive jumping. And then we need to specify a new component, which we'll derive component for, struct player. This is a marker component, so there's nothing on it. There's no fields, anything like that. It's just there as a label for our player, basically. So apply controls then. I think we have a jump function happening in here. Yeah, so we're doing keyboard pressed key code space right now. Should we remove that first? So the thing we need to do is actually query the input stuff. So apply controls will now also accept a query for the action state for our custom action with the player component that we were looking for. So this is, and actually we're only going to have one player, so maybe I'll make this single, which is new in 0.15. And then instead of keyboard input, we're going to just check this action state. So if we go down to our jump, we have keyboard pressed space here, and I'm just going to go action state, just pressed jump. But I think we do want pressed because that's what we were using before. Action state, they're doing that from the query. So we can just name this action state, I think. Instead of player, action state. And then if we run that, it'll have to download and compile Leafwing. But the idea here is basically now we have an abstraction between inputs like left arrow, right arrow, WASD, controller, whatever, that gets translated into like game actions. And then our code for actually doing anything in the game relies on those game actions and querying whether those game actions are active or not. So we end up with a separation between input methodology and actual game logic, which is really nice. Adding Leafwing, because we have Git dependencies, I think adding Leafwing triggered a recompile larger than it otherwise would have. But that's fine. So the other thing, is my controller plugged into my Windows machine? Yes. So we could do controller as well. Where is, here's registered gamepads. Did the single player have gamepad stuff? It's up, down, left, right, directions. This is probably the demo we should have used. This is a larger input map. Question is, does this have controller? And I don't think it does. So registered gamepad. I know gamepads became entities in Bevy 0.15, so they're newer than I remember using them. Oh, that's cool. Their demo is press L, left and right trigger to join the game. That's a cool demo. So if we are going to do, we don't really need to change this right now, but I do want the jump to be in here because specifically I want the like interact button to be in here as well. So we've got jump. I'll leave run even though we're not using it, and then I guess interact would be the good thing to call this. We don't know if we're going to separate anything out yet, so I think that's fine. And then we're going to end up doing action state in the raycast as well, probably. Is it true that once you go Mac, you never go back, even for Linux users? And what am I hearing Linux users switching to BSD? I am a multi-operating system person, so I don't not go back to anything. I go back to everything all the time. Especially since I create educational content, I need to make sure things work on like Mac, Windows, and Linux. Although generally speaking, if it works on Mac, it also works on Linux. So that's less important, but that's not true for Windows. So I think the other thing we want down here is action state for the raycast. And then we can do something like if action state dot, I guess just pressed. And then we do action state, or action is what we have, right? Action interact, which does need to be a reference. And so that does seem to be working. I'll make this action interact. We'll just debug interact. We'll just debug interact for the moment. A lot of warnings at the moment. This is eGUI stuff right here. So I'm not worried about that. Couple of unused things. We could probably get rid of those. I think this one, I think I added vertex colors to one of the meshes in Blender. So they were included when I exported GLTF from Blender. And that's what color 1 is here. So I either need to clear those out or change the name if I'm going to use the vertex colors. But these winit warnings are all eGUI related. And I'm going to be honest, I don't, the malloc stack logging thing, that looks like a new shell error actually, which is wild. So we can get rid of eGUI, and if we bring it back and I start interacting with this, I think it'll, I guess it isn't doing it now. Yeah, there it is. So you can see that when I hover over or go back out, sometimes that issue shows up. So it's definitely like an eGUI overlay kind of issue. We don't have a key for doing interact, so we need to do that. Our input map is jump in space, and then let's also have, I don't know, E for interact. So when we added the new dependency, the build took a while, but now notice that even though we have like 500 transitive dependencies in this project right now, it still builds very quickly. So now we can hit E and we get an interact. What's the best way to, well, the other thing is I want to get the unused imports out of here because we don't need them. And they're kind of annoying for warnings. So interact, right. This is just kind of an arbitrary raycast. It's an arbitrary raycast against colliders. I don't think we want it to go through anything, so I think the behavior it's exhibiting right now is correct. We do kind of need to know the entity that it's on. Which we have, hit.entity. Let's bring eGUI inspector back. And let's see, we have crates here. Level is going to have children which will have children, which will have a couple of crates. And on those crates, we have our rigid body. But the collider is on one level down. So maybe we raise the collider up one level so that the collider is actually on that entity. Let's do what? Crates or interactables, I guess. Make this generic to start with. Query for entities that have what? I guess it's entities with a rigid body, but what else do we need off this? We already have the entity, so we don't really need to query for anything. Maybe in raycast, or I guess we're shape casting, right? We're not raycasting. I guess we really only need to perform that raycast when we're hitting the interact button, so we can move this to something that is a little bit more efficient later. Obviously, we don't have anything in the game yet to worry about performance, so what do we need here? We need the... I'm trying to think about how I want to identify that we have actually hit a particular box in the sense that I want to interact with that entity. So I guess we could just take it and move it. And for that, we probably do want the collider to be one level up. So we got crate cube, right? And if the name is just crate, and we run this, then our collider should go up one level. What's up with that formatting? That looks awful. Rust Analyzer really not helping me out there. So raycast still working on those boxes, and then we go to the level, we go to the children, we go to the children of the children, we look at the crate, and the crate should now have a collider on it, and it does, which is wonderful. These crates also have children deeper in the hierarchy, so we kind of need to... If we were going to update the color or like the materials or whatever, I think we would need to dig into this. Yeah, so crate cube mesh.0 and crate cube mesh.1 are the two split outs for the material for the submeshes. And those are what have standard material on them. So we could do something like drop a timer on it and animate a value of color over time to change the color of the box. I don't think that that's what I want to do. I think I just want to move it. Which should be enough to do the crate. So we need transforms is what we need. So this will be mute transform, I think. But we also have... We already have the entity. And the transform isn't going to be... Trying to think about this for a second. I think the transform will need to get zeroed out. So we do need to do this. And then we will need to place it on the empty. I don't think we have anything selecting that empty yet. But if we take a look in Blender and we go to our level scene with the character and stuff, the character has a box up here, which is an empty, which is named, hopefully. Yeah, it's named hold. So we should have an entity, or we should have an entity with a name of hold that we can look for. So when we raycast, we'll also need hold position, and that will be a single, or I guess it can't be a single. We have to do name. This is something I want to change in the future. But we aren't using GLTF extras or anything right now, so it's going to be a little bit, hey, let's go find the name of this thing, rather than having labels. So hold position is this empty that has a name of hold. And we don't need the transform because we're going to parent it to it. We need the entity. So if we press interact, which instead of debug, I'll do info here. If we press interact, then we need to find I guess we can find map. And this is going to be name, which we're going to... I don't know that we're going to dereference. Maybe do as stir equals hold. Right, and then this is an option of this. This would need to be then some entity. We need to open our paren here. We need to do entity here. And this should be the entity if we have one. So let sum hold empty, because if we don't have one, then we actually need to return. Which, fallible systems in 0.16, y'all. I already want to use main. I literally already want to use main because we now have fallible systems. 0.15 has been out for a week and I want to switch to main. Which is not great. I'm going to stay unstable. We're going to do it like this. No hold empty in player. I guess no entity with name hold in I guess it's not in player at all. It's just in general. So we have the hold empty. We need to commands.entity hold empty. Entity cloning is also on main. So I think we're going to take the entity and move it in as a child. So what do we want to do here? We want to do this. to find the box that we're going to do. Do I think a Bevy is going to get an editor in 2025, or will we have to wait longer than that? I think Bevy will get an editor as soon as it's ready to have an editor, if that makes sense. That could be, I hope it's in 2025 for at least the first. Okay, so when we interact, we get cube entity and entity. And this print line should be somewhere, assuming that print line didn't run? Weird. Okay. Do I think it's going to get an editor in 2025? I hope so. I do truly believe that we'll get a minimal version of an editor in 2025. I don't know that we'll have like, so I don't know that Bevy is going to go in the direction of having like a full built-in like Godot level editor, if that makes sense, or like an Unity level editor. I don't think that's the goal in the short term. The goal in the short term is to do effectively like a plugin where your team can build like a Bevy application that can be distributed to people who then can do level design using your actual game. So using things like the Bevy remote protocol, etc., to move things around and potentially insert or delete or whatever entities. That's going to rely on the Bevy scene notation to be sort of rich in functionality, to have that serializable format. So I think we're going to get, like, roughly speaking, we got Bevy remote protocol. We're going to get some kind of like viewer. We're going to get something that serializes Bevy scene notation, and then it's going to move and go on from there. The Bevy prototype repo has a whole, like, what do we want to actually do here? Bevy editor prototypes, that's why. The Bevy editor prototypes repo has a link to this doc. This doc has like a desired roadmap for like stage 0, stage 1. We're in stage 1 right now. And then stage 2 is basic editing, editor game interaction, UX, UI foundations, fundamental features, etc. And then like a whole bunch of other stuff that, is future. So I think we'll get stuff in 2025. Whatever you consider to be like an editor, like a full thing, I don't know, because I don't know what you define as a full editor. But we will get progress in 2025. Is the code Blender stuff you're editing available on a public repo somewhere? I haven't pushed it yet. Because I actually truly do not know what to do with the large assets, if I'm being perfectly honest. This is 71 megabytes already. I would have to, I think, separate out all the textures that I'm using in this GLB. On top of that, the blend file is not that bad right now. I have substance files. I don't know how big they are. 112 megabytes per substance file. So I don't know. They're not like massive files, but 100 is kind of like the limit for throwing it into a Git repo. So, and I'm changing them fairly often too. So I actually don't know what to do with these assets. Right? I can put the code up for sure, but I truly don't know what to do with the assets, and you won't be able to run the game without the assets in any meaningful way. So it's not up currently. But yeah, if I can figure out what to do with those assets, then those assets will go up as well. Why doesn't line 389 not need an if? Oh, maybe I could put them on itch. Maybe I could just have an itch project that is like a free asset pack that you could then download and run with the game. That would be interesting. Why doesn't line 389 not need an if? 389. Where's 389? Oh, why does it need an if? Because there's a syntax called let else. So let else syntax lets you destructure a value from some expression, which is what I'm doing here. So basically this is saying if it's sum, give me the value inside of it, and then continue, and we can access hold empty down here, right? So if I was like info hold empty, this works. And then if this is not true, so if the destructuring doesn't hold or whatever, then we hit this else block, and this else block has to return a type of never, which is why we're doing like a full-on return here. So like we can't continue past this unless this destructuring succeeds. Let else syntax. Also, hey Xavier, nice to see you. Or something like Google Drive. I haven't looked into using Google Drive for something like that. I don't think that's a great experience, but yeah. Let else, however, wonderful experience. Love let else. In 0.16, we're going to be able to do like question mark here. So things will get a little bit more ergonomic for systems. But because systems can't return a result, we can't use that yet. Or not that they can't return a result, it's just that the setup for it is not something most people do. And I don't feel like setting it up to do that and piping everything into an error handler. I tried to make that distinction in This Week in Bevy, that it's not that it's not possible currently, it's just that most people don't do it because it's kind of a pain in the ass. But you can totally handle errors. Okay, so we have the empty, right? We aren't getting any hits, which feels weird. So let's turn this from a print line into an info. We'll leave the format string. Why not? Yes, absolutely. You can chain and like you can create ins and outs with the systems. That is totally possible. I keep framing it in my head as you can't do it, but that is not true. And I'm trying to be more intentional about indicating that it's not that is not true. So Shapecaster and Ray hits is not seemingly returning anything. Ever. So that's interesting. Because the debug is definitely hitting. Am I messing something up here? For Shapecaster and Ray hits. Oh, is it not Ray hits? It's going to be like Shape hits, isn't it? Yeah, it is Shape hits. Not that we couldn't do a query for Shapecaster and Ray hits, but I don't know what you would do there for. We don't have iter sorted on shape hits. Interesting. What do we have? I guess shape hits doesn't go through things. We don't have a normal on the hit either. I guess because it's a shape. That makes sense. We don't actually need it to be either because we aren't actually whatchamacallit, we aren't actually doing anything that requires that information. All right, so hit entity at 0, 0, and a position. Wonderful. Did you open an issue at the raycast debug flipping? I did, absolutely. It's on the Avian 3D repo. It's about 5 issues down right now if you look at the repo. A friend of mine uses Git LFS for larger files. Haven't used it yourself. Yeah, too much Git LFS on GitHub is paid. And also, it's not just an issue that it's paid. It's an issue that an arbitrary bad actor could cost me an arbitrary amount of money. So if you use Git LFS and somebody forks the repo, the LFS usage that they use contributes to your capacity, is my current understanding. Which is, there's no way to use LFS for open source on GitHub, I don't think. I mean, like, technically you can, but it's a really bad idea. I've heard people using LFS privately with better results. Like, the issue isn't LFS, the issue is GitHub. But yeah, I think saying put it on itch, letting people download it and throw it into the assets directory is the best approach that I think I've heard of so far. Because that would also allow some level of versioning without needing, like, to store everything. So, like, I could theoretically do, like, a quote-unquote release after stream, right? Hey, here are the assets for what we did on stream. And then have a GitHub release that lines up with that, and then people can look at it for those assets, download them, run the game. We should probably also get the game up on itch at some point. I don't know. We're not there yet. I might still choose to do things that mean this won't run in a browser. Okay, so we've got hits. More than one even. We only have one. We're a one-hit wonder. So with this, then I think long-term we probably want it to animate somehow, but we don't have character animation yet. Like, clearly we have a little cylinder with eyes. So I think I'll deal with that later. For hits, we have our hit entity. I think because this is a shape cast, we will only ever need the first one. I don't really dang. I don't really want the game to crash if it does have multiple. So maybe we do this. Right, and then we else this. Get rid of the extra stuff there. I guess user interacted without a hit. I guess this isn't really a warning because this should be able to happen just arbitrarily, right? So this is just like trace level info, I guess. Because it's not really an issue. It should, in the regular course of the game, happen. So there's an entity, there's an entity. We can hit multiple entities. Wonderful. Apparently, shape hits data has 0.1, no need for ray origin plus ray direction times hit time of impact. Although there are different positions and normal one, but in the collider space. Yeah, I don't think we need any of the hit information, actually. We just need to know the entity right now. So I think we're just going to get rid of that. That's debug information from earlier, is what that is. Yeah, when exactly do you need to use deref? When you need to dereference something. That is a really unsatisfying answer. Let's see, Rust deref should have docs. It's worth reading this. There's the deref trait in the Rust standard docs will have an explanation. It won't necessarily be the best explanation for you right now. Right now, you're probably only using dereference to take a reference off. So if you have something that is a shared reference to some value and you want it to be just the value, you can use a star to do that. There are a whole bunch of other things. There's something called deref coercion even. So you can have something and deref and it will coerce to something else, like a vec will coerce to a slice kind of thing. So yeah, there's a decent amount to it. There's a bunch of information here. And I would suggest that you read that. Yeah, you gave it a quick read, but sometimes it doesn't need the operator. I would have to see something specific to tell you why it doesn't need it. But one thing I will say is that Rust is capable of coercing things, right? Like deref coercion exists. So I would say if you're unaware of when it needs to be used, start by not using it. And then when the compiler tells you that you need it, add it and figure out why you needed it at that spot, because the compiler will give you additional information. Okay, so we have the hold empty. I guess this is all of them, right? That's the wrong thing to put. Shapecaster shape hits. Player? Can we scope this down to player? And then we can throw a single on it? Oh, that's not the right thing to do. With player is what I want. I don't remember offhand where we put the shapecaster. I think it's on player. If it is, then our code should still work. Looks like it does. So here I'm going to do single because currently we only have one. I don't know if we'll have multiple in the future. But I like encoding the fact that we wrote this code with the intention of only having one. So if we have multiple, then something is potentially wrong. So this is then always ray hits. Unfortunate that we can't destructure that. What is the type of this query? I haven't used single all that much yet. Query single shapecaster shape hits. I wish we could destructure this. I don't know how that would work. Let's take a look at single. right? Yeah. See query for more details. But we can't use query in the same way that we use single for the purpose of what I'm trying to do. I guess. Yeah. It implements deref. Single as deref target. Cool. I think you're right. I think deref will give it to us. So another use for deref. This is implementing deref for single, which I think if we look at the type, it won't show me the type. That's fine. Whatever. Deref for single, which is not a shared reference to single. It's just single, the struct. But it implements deref, which then gives you the item that is inside of the single. So not a shared reference case, but a case in which this thing implements deref, which is why it's kind of like, yeah, you can give a bunch of examples of when deref is something that you want to use. But the only real explanation is like if the thing implements deref and you need it to deref, which is really unsatisfying as far as like answers go. So we need a hit, right? So let some hit equals hit iter next. User interacted without a hit. Kill this, kill that. So now we have our empty. We have our hit entity. So commands dot entity. I hope it's still called entity. I actually don't know if we changed that. We don't have commands here. We need commands. Commands are deferred actions, effectively, if you're unfamiliar with those are. So we're basically queuing up something to happen to this entity after this system is over. Technically at the next sync point, but it's a little bit more advanced than the explanation that I want to go into. So not insert. Add child. Hit entity. And then we need transform to zero out, right? Did we get transform? No. We need to interactables.get hit entity. If this fails, we're in trouble, right? I think we can unwrap here. If we have an entity, it needs to have a transform. I don't like my programs panicking, though. And I don't like it so much that I'm going to write this anyway. And we'll call this an error. Interactable object must have transform. I guess theoretically, if it didn't, then what would be the case where we didn't? If something didn't have a transform, but it had a raycast hitting it, That feels like it would be a really weird situation. There's no 0, is there? I guess default. Oh, get mute is what we need here, at least. Oh, else. I'm staring at that red squiggle going, what is supposed to be there? And my guess is this is okay, not some. Interactables isn't listed as mutable. And then we have a exclusive reference here. Can we not just set the whole thing? Let's see what the compiler tells us. Oh, because I didn't specify it as mutable. Yeah, that makes sense. So theoretically, this should work. Like a defer and go. Defer and go is like drop, if I remember correctly. Oop, sick. Just broke something. Assertion failed. b.min.comple b.max.all. Do we need to take the collider off? Take the rigid body off, maybe? Before we move it like that? Yeah, defer and go is basically drop and rust. So, like, on some conceptual level, yes. And I say yes because drop is also a trait that you can implement. So, like, things that have behavior for when they're dropped, implement drop. Happy holidays, yo. I assume that means you're leaving, so thanks for coming. Right? Like, things go out of scope, they get dropped. Oh, like with the Bevy commands. Like a defer in go. No. No, defer and go, if I remember correctly, is pretty directly analogous to drop. In the sense that, like, a defer and go will run at the end of your function or whatnot when you're returning and stuff, which is very much what drop does. So I would almost say yes. It's fuzzily the same, but it's not actually the same. The thing that commands do is there's a command queue where you add a bunch of commands to that queue. And then the way that Bevy functions is by running a bunch of systems in a schedule, right? One of those systems is called apply deferred, although we might have renamed it in the last. I vaguely remember it being renamed, but apply deferred, and in apply deferred, it will apply that command queue. So not like defer in the sense that it doesn't do the same thing. Yes, like defer in the sense that it does something later after this system is done. You're confused. What if the interactable object gets animated when picking up and generating another shapecast hit while in the animation? Also, do you really need the transform, not the global? Do I need to reset the global? I think I can set the transform and parent it, and then the global should reset. The global is like, we're not using the position of the object we're picking up, right? We are clearing the position of the object we're picking up, right? So the transform is local. It will have a global. We're adding it as a child to the empty, which is on top of the character. And if we reset the transform, then it should be on top of the character, right? Because global should inherit from transform. What actually happened is that Avian panicked when we did that. I actually don't know why Avian panicked. There was an assertion here. I think that maybe we need to remove the rigid body or something like that. This is in Collision Collider mod, right? So I think that I think that effectively what we're doing is we're taking something that has a collider and we're moving it directly, teleporting it to a location in which it is inside of another collider. Right, for the animation you probably need both. Yeah. So I think that we actually do need to remove the rigid body. Right? Commands.hit entity. Commands.entity hit entity. Dot remove rigid body. Maybe we also just remove the collider for the moment. And then we can always add it back. If you had to make something like a video player that also does networking and you need to run it on like minimal environments, is Bevy light enough or should you do WGPU setup from scratch? What do you mean by minimal environments? If you mean embedded, Bevy currently like has no standard stuff happening, but wouldn't be my first choice. I would work with like Embassy or something like that. But if you're making a video player that is supposed to work off of like an embedded device, I think you have other issues. I don't know what you mean by minimal. I will say that Rust programs tend to be highly optimized in that sense. Yeah. So like we were talking about compile times earlier. One of the reasons the compile times are higher or seem high is because of all the extra stuff it's doing to make sure that the actual binary that you're running is efficient. So I would say that it's going to be fine. But obviously, if you just dump a bunch of stuff into memory, if you dump like 3 gigs of stuff into memory for some reason, it won't be fine. But like Bevy ECS should run just fine. As far as I'm aware, anyway. Cool. So let's try that. That was just a really straightforward kind of remove the avian stuff. Well, it went somewhere. It definitely went somewhere. Where do we think it went? Let's look at the character, children, entity, children, character, children, hold, children, crate. Where do we think this crate is? Oh, the crate still has collider stuff on it. That'll be interesting. I don't remember how to remove like required components. I'll have to look at that. It went to Albuquerque. Should have taken the left at was it Albuquerque? Is it a left at Albuquerque? Which crate did you use for the World Inspector? This is Bevy Inspector E GUI, like Hukasu just said. You think it went to the World Origin and then fell through the floor? Yeah, I guess because it still has all of these other things, it just no longer has a rigid body or a collider, but it still has like the collider AABB and the density and the mass properties and stuff. So if that's the case, I should be able to make it happen again, right? Interestingly, these other crates don't have colliders on them. I think I messed up my choice in naming. Children, entity, children, crate 001, crate 002, crate 003. And I'm doing name Aster crate. I don't like any of my options here. I think we need a different solution for this. Gotta go. Love your work and content. Glad you're enjoying it. Have a good rest of your day. Yeah, starts with, definitely. We definitely lost a crate. Oh, we didn't lose a crate. The crate is just inside the other crate because it didn't get... See, this is going to be the problem with doing things by name. We need to get GLTF extras to work. Box goes up. Box goes down. Box goes up. Box goes boom. So I have no idea where the crate is going. I should have looked at the translation. That's what I keep forgetting to do. So crate, children, entity, children. I think crate 1 is going to be the one that moves. Transform. Eat. That's really interesting. So the Bevy Inspector eGUI display, if you have something open, will stick with the index of the open thing rather than tracking any kind of entity ID. So the list of children is actually open state by index, not open state by entity ID. That's really interesting. Okay, so children, character, children, hold, crate. It has a cube. Interesting. So crate is here. crate has a bunch of stuff. The transform of the crate is currently 0, 0. Global transform of the crate is... Is it actually there? Interesting. Is it just not visible? Inherited visibility. It's really interesting that that cube is a mesh. I didn't expect an empty to come in as a mesh. I will say that. Is that cube the... This is crate. That was it. It rescaled. Huh. Why is it scaled? I guess because we set the entire default, right? Feels strange that it would scale. But I guess we are we are really messing with the transform. Yeah, it is inside of the body, Hukasu. I just expected to be... I just expected it to be bigger. You know? What's the scale of the other crates? That's a great question. Let's find out. I think they're all one. So in Blender, these crates are 1x1 crates. They are a radius of 0.5. So they are absolutely supposed to be 111. Right? Let's hold crate here. Let's pick one of these up. Is the scale of the parent 1.0 too? Yes, the player should also be 1.0. What's happening? We are currently raycasting from a player to a collider. That collider represents like a box or something like that. There's an empty on top of the player's head. We're trying to move the box to on top of the player's head to be like a pickup action. And right now what's happening is that box is getting TARDISed and compressed into a 0.1 scale and placed on the head. So I don't know why exactly the transform is like that. But I guess... So this is 111, right? I'm just going to check all the transforms as we go down, I think. 111, 111, 111. We're in hold. Hold is 0.1. Because I don't think we can apply scale to the empty. Item. Oh, maybe we can. Maybe I just don't know what I'm doing. Scale, apply, scale. Who would have thought? Export. Python having issues. That's not good. GLTF core export issue. That's not good. GLTF core export issue is not what I want to see in my life, ever. Apply transform strikes again. Still happening. Because probably we didn't get the export to happen. So, export GLTF. Export GLTF. Hopefully no Python issue. No Python issue. Don't know why we got a Python issue. There it is. Now it's got a hat. Now there's no rigid body or collider or anything on it. So I feel like that's interesting. Nice. File was probably opened by something else. You think so? And that's the way people who try to use mesh 0, which is the way to get index-based meshes from a GLTF in Bevy, because they do not apply transform. Best helmet. That's good. We can play football now, right? Turn this into a football sim. I guess, sorry, American football. Cool. Let's make it so that this is not a helmet. Can we automatically calculate the height of this entity is my current question. Angry and European. I said American football. Okay, so we have these cubes and everything. What is the right way to get, like, the entity height in this case? Arbitrary entity height is kind of what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for, like, I can hard code this. I don't want to hard code this. So where is children, entity, children, hold, children, crate. So we've got collider AABB. That's an interesting one. If hold is a bone, then move it in Blender. Hold is not a bone. Everybody says AABB. I should have just looked at chat. Hold is not a bone. Hold is just an empty. It might have a bone in the future, because we might be animating the pickup. I don't know that it's worth animating the pickup. Right? Like, if we search, let's not search for Link picking things up on the main screen. What's a game in which you pick up a box? Yeah, Breath of the Wild. That's what I thought. Um, it is still an object in Blender, no. So changing there should work, no. You mean the scale? Yeah. I think we wouldn't have wanted to apply transform scale on a bone. Oh, does Overcooked do that? I guess that's just holding things in front of you for the most part, right? I want the opposite of using a random force. Right? Like, I don't want this. I want... I definitely didn't find... Oh, a bomb, right? It'll pick up a bomb. Where's the bomb pickup animation? Because a bomb out of your pocket just like appears out of your pocket. But there's ones on the ground like this. Ocarina of Time. If I remember correctly, it does kind of animate, but it's kind of like jerky. It's not like smooth, if that makes sense. Like it just pops into wherever the character is. Breath of the Wild Link carrying pot. Breath of the Wild Link carrying pot. That's a fish. This is hilarious because it's just like Link's just doing this and there's stuff in his arms. There's the chickens too. I guess I'll look at some actual gameplay later. I have Breath of the Wild. I can just open the game and go pick something up. But Overcooked was one of the other things that was suggested. I think in Overcooked, everything is held in front of you, right? Like this. Oh, they have disembodied hands. That's another option. Disembodied hands is an option. Just floating it in front of you. You don't know anything about Blender. What resources would you recommend to learn about bones, AABBs, etc.? AABBs are just axis-aligned bounding boxes. They're cubes. So, not too much to learn there. Bones and rigging and stuff like that. I've just been kind of searching YouTube and playing with stuff. I don't have a good resource for you, unfortunately. You would just do some linear algebra using both empties transform. I don't remember what that's for, but yeah. Oh, you mean like, yeah. So there are like curves and stuff now, etc. I think it popping into place is not bad. I think that moving it gradually from ground to overhead or ground to in front or whatever is probably more of a polish thing that I can deal with another time. It does seem like most of these games hold in front. Link has some hold on top. Disembodied hands is always an option. Just kind of float it in front of the character. I didn't know that game had evil mice. I guess it makes sense. Ratatouille trying to get in the kitchen. You would parent the crate to the player empty, set the crate transform being the inverse of the crate empty transform. Set the crate transform to being the inverse of the crate empty transform. I actually don't think I know what that is. I can't visualize it in my head. The inverse of the crate empty transform. You mean the inverse of the scaling matrix? Because the empty transform is going to be... are you talking... You're talking about putting the thing on the head in the right space, right? The crate empty is a child of the crate. Crate empty is a child of the crate. The crate doesn't have an empty. The player has an empty on their head. This also looks hilarious. Oh, you mean place an empty at the bottom of the crate and then use that empty and put the empties in the same spot. That's what you mean. That makes sense. Last week, the crate had an empty at floor level. Did I do that? Maybe I deleted it. We can definitely do that, though. Oh, you know what did have... You know what I think you're thinking of? The box. Not the character. The test level. That's way too zoomed in. Anybody want to see a close-up brick? This box, I think, has the empty. Yeah. We put an empty on this box, not on the crate. But we can definitely do that on the crate. I do kind of like that because then we can kind of configure anything. So let's do... I'm going to use my... Oh, that's not the right thing to do. I did the wrong thing. I hit the shortcut on the wrong context. Scenes. Nope, not scenes. Scenes view layer. Let's not expand everything. Shift A, empty. So this gets turned into a mesh, which is really weird. I don't want a mesh. So axes or arrows? I guess axes. And then we grab this and move it Z negative 0.5. Hey, what's going on? We're adding an empty to a box so that we can put the box on top of the player's head. You're still confused about the concept of parent-child relations in ECS. Parent-child relations in ECS, as they're implemented in Bevy, are actually fairly understandable. If you have an entity, then it can have a tree of children beneath it. That is parent-child relationship. Technically speaking, I believe you can also, like, parent and child are just components, right? So parent has an entity inside of it, component or child has an entity inside of it. So a child will have parent on that entity and point it to the parent, and the children component will have an entity pointing it to the child, that kind of thing. There's nothing special about them except for the fact that Bevy decided this is the way that basic hierarchy is going to be implemented inside of Bevy for the moment. So if you did that yourself, you would also be able to create that structure with your own parent component and your own child component. That's all it is. It's like a tree structure going from parent down. It's components with entities stored inside of them. So if you try to get the parent of a current component, you're basically just saying, the entity that I have, look for the parent component. That parent component has an entity ID inside of it. That's the parent. And it's just a tree. It's a tree in the same way the Blender UI is a tree. And I'm realizing just now that I didn't scale up the interface for people to actually be able to see. So visually, Cram is saying the right thing. The outliner here, so like crate would be our root entity, or crate cube would be under that. Crate cube mesh would be under that. Crate inner and crate outer are two children of the crate cube mesh entity, whatever that is. And then empty and crate cube mesh are children of crate cube, and like that kind of thing. Yeah. It's like a simulated relation. And it's really important to understand that that's just like not special. In the sense that like you can build significantly more complicated relations, and people do. Airy is a wonderful crate that does a bunch of more complicated relations. But it's all done via components, entities, things like that. There is a plan to do more complicated or more advanced entity relations inside of Bevy itself. But yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for the summary, Incline Plane. Appreciate that. But yeah, we probably will use Airy at some point. We haven't needed it yet, but I would love to get into it. A game that has lots of picking up items, Octodad. I guess one of the things we could do is like make an area on the ground that the player has to put the entity into. Is the AABB the right? No, that's not what I was doing. I got distracted. Okay, so we have an empty here, and this is the hold point, is what I'm going to call this. I'm going to call this hold point specifically because it is meant for the player hold, and currently nothing else. So with a hold point, we have the hold empty, right? We don't want to reparent that empty. We just want to line them up. But the question is, can we line those up? I think we just get the location from it. Is the old point parented? No. I remember how to do this. I swear. Come on. Hold point, crate. Hold point, crate. I guess that's the collection. Control P in the viewport. Okay, I think it's parented now. We had a crash. Blender quit unexpectedly. Would you like to submit a report? In the original cube, I think, which was the original question? You selected the crate collection to be parent, not the crate object. But yes, that's what I want, right? I want the crate collection to be the parent because the crate collection is going to be the root entity. It doesn't look like we actually... Did we parent this? For the other cube? It doesn't look like it. Hard to tell. Huh. I don't think I know how to tell whether that's parented or not. You can tell by the indentation? Oh, that's it? That's all that is? Wait, so you're just saying that because this is inside of the collection, it's parented? Oh. That makes so much more sense. I thought it was like some special other relation. I don't know why I thought it was some special other relation. Let's just make sure the thing runs first. Cool. So we need to get the location of that empty relative to the center point, which is fairly easy to do in terms of math. Oh, it picks it up? Yeah. Here. For the new joiners on the stream. We fixed the raycast stuff. We implemented, finished off the shape casting, implemented Leafwing Input Manager. Leafwing Input Manager is setting an action that then interacts with the raycasting system. We take the center point of the transform of the box, we remove the rigid body in the collider, and we stick it on the empty on top of the player's head. I filed the bug against Avian for the Viz bug last time. And other than that, there's been no progress. So the bug is filed. It is like a known thing. I haven't looked into it anymore. I don't think that anybody else has looked into it anymore. But it is like filed and it exists in the world. Okay, so we have to look for the hold empty location. I think we have to do that with, I think there's new functions for iter children, right? Oh, dang, did we rename this? Let's go look for ancestors, which should point us documentation wise to its descendants. It's not. So we have hierarchy query. We have siblings, leaves, descendants. And then if we do that, then we can use our name thing here. Right, so children is a query for children. If we do, where's names? I guess I don't want to call this whole position. I want to call this named entities, which is everything, right? This is a query that I really want to get rid of. This is a piece of functionality that I really want to get rid of. And I think we can use GLTF extras for that. Now the goal is to make it to move on top of the head with the bottom rather than the center. Yeah, exactly. That's what we're doing. So we have named entities. We are going to use that with what does iter descendants come on the query? No, children gets passed into iter descendants, right? No. Yeah. Children dot iter descendants hit dot entity. I feel like I never remember how to use this API. So if we iter descendants of this hit entity and we look for named entities dot get do a match, I think is what I want to do. So if we match on this, I don't care about the error, so I'm going to match on the sum none here. That's entity, this is name. Name dot aster equals hold, what do we call this? Hold point. Hold point. So we look for the hold point. We actually need the transform. So I guess we need the entity. That feels weird. Did I write that wrong? You probably need the transform in the children query. I don't think you can add transform to a children query, can you? Read-only world query. Yeah, I don't think you can. I think it has to be the children query, and then we have to get the transform otherwise. What happens if you try? Let's find out. First, I have to match guard, because apparently I've forgotten my match guard syntax. If. Named entities.get would be E. We have to dereference it, right? Yeah. And then this is... We're just going to say false for the moment. Okay, so you want me to see if I add transform to the children, what happens? Transform, children, transform. We end up with not having iter descendants because the hierarchy extension trait is implemented, I believe, for the query of children specifically. Right, so this is a hierarchy query extension. And there's an implementation down here for query Oh, what's the actual? Yeah, unsatisfied trait bounds. The query for iter descendants requires a shared reference to self where the query is a query for shared references to children. So there's type restrictions for calling this on anything else. Which is totally fine. This is interesting. This is not interactables currently. This is just transforms. Which means that if we have another query for shared references to transforms, I think we have an issue. We could just use interactables, but if we're going to use it in both places, I want to rename it. So we'll rename that to transforms. This then, we've found a hold point. This will be an option of an entity. Let's hold point entity. I guess hold point. I guess this is okay as well. It's not okay. What's the... This is an entity. Oh, because I didn't finish the... Let's just say return here for a second. If we can't find a hold point on the object, I think I do want to return. No hold point entity and interactable entity tree. So I always want a hold point to be there. If there isn't one, I want to get warned in development. Theoretically, we could let this pass through and we could just use the center point for some things. I just don't really want to do that. What's the difference between children.iterDescendants entity versus children.get entity? Or other than it turn it into an iterable? Other than it turn it into an iterable. It's just the iterable part. Like iter_descendants gives you an iterable of all children, breath first. Whereas children.get entity would just give you one child. And actually, I think it wouldn't even do that. Yeah, so this is a query for all children. If you did children.get, you would be getting the child or the children struct for all for that entity. And children then doesn't have as much useful stuff on it. Contains references to the child entities of the entity that you would then .get on. So technically you have like a vec of children here kind of thing, right? Whereas the other one is an iterable of all children in a breadth first search way. If you do .get, then you get this struct specifically, which you can then use to do things, but it is the children of that entity immediately, not all of them, if that makes sense. So we have the hold point, then we need to also get the transform. Yeah, if you need to iterate over all of them anyway, might as well use the iter version. So this is find, right? If we find the hold point, I feel like this is getting a little bit messy in here. This entity then needs to be and really I want this to be find map. And this is an issue because that's a result. And this is an issue for a reason that I wasn't thinking of. I guess find takes a reference. So we can actually do named entities.get okay. And chain this differently. Like we don't have to write it like this. Like dot. Well, I don't think I want to do that actually. I was going to say we could do like is some end, but we still need that entity. So we would need to map over it, which would probably be dot then, so that we could have the entity and then do the transforms inside of it. And I don't think that that really gets any better. So I think I'm just going to leave it like this. And we don't really need okay here. I can just work with the result, which cleans it up a little bit. This does need to be okay because we're using find map, and that needs to be an option when it comes back. Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. This guard could also go inside. It probably looks a little bit weird as a guard. Okay, so we have hold point. Right, this is a transform. This is the point at which we need to yeah, I think this is the thing that I'm thinking about at the moment. If we parent the empty to the other empty, that doesn't work because we need to parent the root to get the transforms to work. If we just get the position, I think that's better, but it doesn't provide a direct connection between those 2 points. So I think we're just going to use the position. So here we're getting the position for the hit entity and setting it to default. But I think that we need hold point. Transform from translation, hold point dot translation. And then we're holding a shared reference and a mutable reference at the same time. We can check the compiler, which I think will tell us that. Right? Mutable borrow, immutable borrow. This, we only need the translation. This is an option that we're returning. So it really doesn't matter where we map. But we really only need that vec3. which doesn't have a translation anymore and is just the hold point. Only using what we need makes this easy. Transform hold point dot inverse. I still, like, I don't know what inverse is doing for us there, is my issue with that. Right, like, I need you to say the inverse is useful for XYZ reason. And this needs to be negative on the Z. No, not negative on the Z, negative on the Y. I'm thinking in Blender. Transform equals hold point dot inverse. Hold point. And we've got a crate on top of our player now. Oh, the joys of inconsistent coordinate conventions. Yes. Oh, not this, though. You want me to do Bevy, transform. This is adorable. You need to transform translation from the empty to the crate. No, I don't. I don't need the, I don't think I do. I might need it if I'm doing animation. But if I'm doing animation, then I can just do point minus point kind of thing. I'm not sure I see the usefulness of the inverse. Also, we don't have an inverse function on anything, so I don't actually know even what inverse you're looking for in that sense. Like vec3s and transforms don't have inverse functions. Fun fact, Splatoon began with tofu blocks as playable characters in the early concepts. Nice. If I build anything even half as successful as Splatoon, I would be a very, very, very happy person. Yeah. The collider is still on the other box, if anybody was wondering. So the collider on the box and the collider on the character are interacting. Given the crate transform from Blender is with a scale of 1 and only offset in the Z or Y axis, it is the same for the moment. Your solution is just more generic. Yeah, but you're saying inverse, and I don't know what you mean by inverse. Right? Inverse. right? Like, do you mean 1 over? Do you mean negative? Do you mean like what is the inverse in this scenario? Because I don't have access to like any invert function on this. I don't see one on transform. Like there's no, I don't know what the inverse would be here. Transform of the empty is local to the crate transform. Inverting it will give you the transform of the crate relative to the empty. But you mean only the translation, right? Because we don't actually want it to scale or anything. Right? I guess technically we're applying the scale in Blender anyway. So technically the scale wouldn't change. 1 over scale, negative translation, negative rotation. Because the transform is local and parented. I wonder if there's anything. Because, like, it would surprise me if Glam didn't have a primitive for that. If that was a thing. Yeah, for the moment, I don't want it to scale, but like theoretically, I could or whatever. I'm just curious as to like if this is a thing that is done in general, what is it called? Because I'm surprised it wouldn't exist, right? Recip. No. Recip for only scale. Reflect. It's on a mat 3. So if it's on a mat 3, oh, that's why did I do that? Bevy. Nope, not that either. Although I need to deal with that later. Transform. So transform, I think you can get the matrix from the transform. Yeah. You would have to compute the matrix. That would give you the map 4. The map 4 then you're saying has the inverse. Yeah, map 4 has inverse, which gives you another map 4, which then you would need to also use. So you could go map 4, hopefully back to transform. Here's transform. Where's the from implementation? From transform, from global. I don't see a from mat. Oh, from matrix. There we go. From mat 4. World from local. So we could take the transform, compute the matrix, invert the matrix, take that matrix, put it back into a transform. I wonder if that's a useful thing to PR. Maybe I do that later. Inverting transforms. Issues. That's an old that's an old issue. I wonder if this is even active. 2022, last time this was active. Interesting. New Bevy users should not be working with Transform unless they have very unusual needs. Oh, this is back when Transform was a map 4, I think, is what this was. Add flip convenience method to transform. Flip, flip, flip. Is there a reason this didn't get pulled in? Yeah, I don't know. Interesting for sure. You can invert each component of the transform individually more efficiently than passing by an intermediate matrix. Yeah, and the only thing that I actually want to do is that translation anyway, currently, which I know is Z, so there's that. If I wanted to place it in multiple generic positions, I could see doing it to a matrix and back or something like that. Oh, if transform uses a double quaternion rather than a map 4, then there should be an inverse double quaternion as well, which ought to have the same effect. I don't know. I think it's just a matrix, but I haven't looked at it in a while. Source. Yeah, I don't know. Might be able to PR it. Yeah, transform, rotation, and scale. TRS. Yeah. For another interactable with the hold point empty, not just offsetted in the z-axis, you will need to invert the world location vec3. I would need to invert the world location vec3. Why would I need to invert the world location vec3? If it is XY back off, then yeah, I guess you're right. For an object that can change scale, big crate, small crate. Oh, like if the object itself changed scale in game? Yeah. I think I'm going to keep them the same size though. Yeah. I think the conversation is useful. I don't necessarily think we need to go super generic right now. But it's worth just being like, this is hard coded to only a Y axis change. Could be generic over translation and scale. By inverting. Transform, matrix, invert. Worth a comment. Maybe at some point in the future I'll go, dang, I really need this to be different. And then I'll read that comment and go, oh yeah, right. Okay, so what do we have here? We have a character that can now pick up an item. This item doesn't work as well, so we'll pick up this one. I guess if you have an item, you kind of shouldn't be able to pick up another one, or maybe you should. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. That puts them all in the same place, so you can pick up infinite items and carry them. You bet directly flipping the 3 transformers is faster than inverting? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for the invert, we're literally just doing one operation, right? So, what do we do with the boxes now that we have them? I feel like placing it down would be one option. Throwing it would be another. The goal was to build stuff, right? What do you mean by the goal was to build stuff? Oh, you mean like build and like build towers and stuff? I don't know. I've had a couple thoughts. I've had a thought like, what if you picked up a platform or something like that instead of like a cube specifically, and then you were standing under things and they could drop. I do want to build environments. Yeah. I do want to build environments in general. I think there will be a level here. I'm thinking about the mechanics because I think that's useful. But maybe we start building a level and maybe mechanics come out of level design too. So for example, the other thing is that a level right now would probably be very simple, which is totally fine. So this is our scene. And now if we do any, let's go into this collection. If we do a collection instance for the crate, then we can place this anywhere we want, right? Like we could have this over here, et cetera, et cetera. I think this wall, probably not useful. Like a climbing game where you have to build towers to climb them. We have to implement mantling if we do that, I think, right? Or I guess jumping, right? So I need to turn off this like because the only thing you can do right now is So the question is, if that's the case and you need to stack things like that, how do you stack them, right? Like, because I can just pick up any random one of these. I need to turn this auto turning off. I can pick up any one of these, right? And then I need to be able to put it down on top of another one. Assuming we stick to cylinders. We will eventually have a character. Hold point translation, neg 1, neg scale 1, hold point scale, rotation. Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess if we are going to do stacking, how do you stack stuff then? Like, what is the... It feels a little bit hard to physically stack stuff. I feel like the control for picking up and putting down might get a little awkward. Feel like you would have to hold it out in front of you. Do I want a snapped stack? It's another great question. I think if we do anything with snapped stacks, the control scheme has to change, right? So if you're gonna stack things repeatedly, I watched my friend playing the new Zelda game with the beds. That is actually like Zelda as lead, like the Zelda game, not the Link game. And they have a fake grid for all the beds and stuff, all the things you can place, so they can place on top of each other. Yeah, it's really cute. My friend had a really good time being like, bed supremacy, and just stacking beds all over the place. So we could have things like multiple size cubes and et cetera, et cetera. I think if we are going to have, if we're going to have stackable things that potentially stack infinitely, I do think we need a grid placement system / an easier way to actually stack things. Like, it's not just it's not just throw things and hope they physically stick, because that wouldn't really be very fun, right? Because you can imagine pretty easily if the entire... Well, let me get rid of this other control system for a second. I have this whole, like, if you don't have any input, then do this other thing that I need to get rid of. So for now, right, we have... Oh, yeah, because I didn't remove it correctly. Okay, cool. I removed it, but I, didn't remove it, I don't think we're going to bring that code back, but I'm going to comment it out for a second instead of removing it completely. Yeah, can it be like half grid? Yeah. But in a grid placement, the boxes are not physics objects, right? I think that they can be and can't be, right? If you pick it up and you place it, maybe it turns from a physics object into a regular thing. If you throw it, maybe it's a physics object. I think also there's a world in which the placement is grid based, but the result of the placement is physics based. Right? So you can place inside of the grid so that you don't have to just randomly put stuff on top of each other. And then you can actually right? Because like, how do I get this box on top of that box? I have to like walk right up to it and then like place it. Whereas I think the placing selection would be grid system, but the result of placing it there then turns into the dynamic rigid body. Oh yeah, optional snapping, that's another thing. Placing sand in Minecraft. Yeah, basically exactly. Cute cylinder character, thank you. I like how I could have done anything, and the thing that I did is literally just put two eyes on a cylinder. And people are like, that's so cute. You can have a hybrid. Yeah. Also, hey, Trent, how's it going? A grid would constrain all interactable to be the same size. I don't think that's true. Right? A placement grid versus size of object are not necessarily the same thing. Right? Because you can do a placement grid and you can place things that are 2 tiles wide, right? At which point you're kind of saying like, okay, so if I have a thing that's 2 tiles wide on my head and I place it in a grid, I can place it at one of the points, but it will cover 2 points, right? You could do the same thing for like a half of a thing. You could place a half of a thing in that placement grid. It would just place in place of a full cube, if that makes sense. So I think the grid of placement and the actual things in the world can be on 2 different sizings. Pixar's character design philosophy is simplexity. They start simple with well-defined silhouettes and shape language, such as a cylinder, and then add a fine detail and texture to it and give character. Nice. Yeah, I think we used a cylinder because it was easy, because Blender didn't really have a capsule that looked like it would export well. Okay, not all the same size, but all size, multiple of the grid size. I think multiple of the grid size is fine, though. That seems like a reasonable restriction. You can see the grid is where the center of the object or whatever snaps to. Doesn't need to be cube-based. Yeah, can be anything. Also, the cylinder is convenient as a table for holding blocks. It truly is. It is. It really is. It's funny. Yeah, I think there's a couple directions we could go with it. I think throwing things is fun. So like theoretically, if there was an enemy and I picked up a box, I could throw it at the enemy and the enemy would get like knocked out. That sounds fun. If you can aim it. You also use a cylinder because not all the libraries you'd have wanted were on Bevy 0.15 yet. Yes. Yeah. Because Leafwing Input Manager wasn't updated yet. Bevy Tenua, we're using like a branch fork and things like that. Cube throw based combat. Hey, sharp edges, corners. It would work. Obviously this wall doesn't actually have a collider on it. This one has a static collider on it. I feel a little bit nervous about doing, like, I don't think you should have to walk up to something and just like be very careful about placing it. That feels like a lot of work, high risk, which means when it falls, you feel really bad. And it doesn't feel particularly controllable, right? Because if I place 2 things like next to each other and then like jump on them and then try to place another one and something like that happens, right? I landed on it and the physics moved. That feels really bad. You feel like it's less the sharp edges and more the mass. Yeah, fair. You'd add a stack point empty to the crate, move the hold point of the second crate to be there, and maybe just leave the top crate as a rigid body. Yeah. You're just saying what sounds cool. Yeah. That's cool. If you're going to do throw-based combat, definitely have some lock-on aim system. Yes, absolutely. I think there needs to be... If we're going to be able to throw things at people, I think we need to be able to, like, lock onto them. I think that's true no matter what, actually. I think that if you do things like that, unless you are doing... like even for first person shooter stuff, unless you're doing Valorant, right? If you're doing Valorant, then I think you can get away with being very hands off in terms of aiming. But if you're doing like Fortnite and somebody's on a controller, you have to do some of that lock on stuff anyway, even if it's not like explicitly we are locking on, but just like a sphere of influence kind of thing, like a hey, you're going over somebody's head, we'll move it a little bit closer kind of thing. I think you have to do some kind of stuff like that anyway. Explicit lock on, I think, would make sense for this game. Like a visual of I'm going to throw this, it's going to hit that person. Sounds good. Maybe a quick lock on aim system is a good thing to do next. Throwing feels like something we could do. Yeah, throwing feels like something we could do. Let's do that. Let's do throwing. Let's put in a dummy that we can lock onto. What is our dummy going to look like? Let's turn that off. I guess... How big is our dummy going to be? We'll find out. Let's see. Shift A. What do we want to put for a dummy? Like make the cylinder be able to turn towards the closest object exactly? I don't know about a lock-on for objects. I think like a lock-on for throwing it at things, yes. But a lock-on for pickups, maybe as well. Yeah, lock-on for pickups or like targeting for pickups. That actually does sound like a really good idea. You think cones should be the enemies? And then they just chase you around and you have to knock them over. Cylinder with a target texture. Spiky and evil. Spiky, it is spiky. What's the size of this one? 2 meters? That feels okay. I think the scale of Z probably needs to stay, and the scale of the others probably need to get reduced. So something a little bit more tall, a little bit more spiky. And then let's make this a collection. What do they usually call these? Not like dummies, but like, I don't know. We'll call it a target. We'll call it target 001, I guess. So we have cone. We probably need, if we're going to do a lock-on system, like actual lock-on, then we probably need some kind of way to deal with that raycast. I'm trying to think about how that would work. The raycast probably needs to be a shapecast. The shapecast could hit something and kind of stick to it for a little bit. Mob. Yeah, mob is a good one too. Cones have a low center of gravity, difficult to knock over. Yeah, so you got to throw the box at them, and once they knock over, they can't get back up. Maybe they're next. Maybe an inverted cone. And then spheres would be really tough to fight with box throwing. So let's do target one. We'll save this. I guess I like mob better. You're right. Let's do mob. This will be raycastable. So I'm trying to think about how we would do the auto targeting system, right? Like the shapecast would work in some sense. I'll have to look into targeting systems, I think. You assume getting into soft bodies is too much right now. A soft body sphere would be neat in principle, like a slime. I think physics soft body, yes. I think physics soft body is too much for the moment. I think we're going to start with something simpler. Let's start with cone. We'll start with cone and just collider. First character, library, test level. We'll go test level. We will, let's say, put cone somewhere in here. Mob 1. So, like, theoretically, we should be able to lock onto that cone and throw one of these boxes at it. And I think that's a good start. Or just throwing the rigid body and letting the physics do the rest? Yeah. I was thinking about throwing in terms of, like, movement and stuff like that too, and I think that I want to start with stable objects and then just get it to throw and hit, and yeah. Oh, pretty high res cone by default. Yeah, I guess we could change that. We could do, let's see, mesh, cone, vertices, 32, 16, 8. Do something really low res. What is 4? 4 looks like a pyramid, right? I think pyramid is cool. Pyramid also kind of like a little bit more top heavy than sphere based cone. Can I have the test level and the collection open at the same time? Okay, so there's this. And then for that, we probably want the anchor to be low. You can hit numpad minus to see everything that's selected, by the way. Very cool. I don't have a numpad. Problem number one. That's why whenever we're in Blender, I talk about getting a larger... oh, numpad dot. Well, still don't have a numpad. I think I need to... Let's see. That should be numpad, I think. That's not numpad. I'm not going to keep clicking buttons. I think I have numpad on my Moonlander. I just don't know where it is. F for focus. Okay, so we have this now. I feel like we're quickly getting to the point where we're going to want to start labeling these things in some way that is not their name. So mob 1 is fine. Let's do... I didn't export that. I need to export that. I need GLTF save on save, or GLTF export on save. Assets, MISC, export. What is darn? Oh, yeah. Picking library to select target. I guess we could technically do that. I like the idea of this being a controller usable game. So picking doesn't really feel like the interaction pattern that I want. Right? Also, if it's just picking based and mouse cursor based, like I can just like click, click, click or whatever. I think it becomes a different game. Yeah, I write a Blender script. Yeah, I could do that. Basically start rebuilding Blenvy on my own. Okay, so we do this. We have this. I actually need this to be WASD. I have it on arrow keys right now. And I guess interact when you are holding something would mean that you throw it. We don't have a state machine for the player yet. So I guess one question is, how do we do targeting? We could do targeting with a shape cast of a different kind. I think auto targeting is going to turn out to be more complicated than just like picking a shape cast hit. Are you going to be making the throw consider physics, i.e. keep momentum, or is it going to be a static yeet? I think once you throw it, it's going to get dynamic static body applied to it again, and it'll be thrown. It'll be like a thrown object. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about with the auto targeting too. Like if you throw something and the thing is moving, are you throwing at the thing or are you throwing 3 frames from now? You know, like a predictive position. I think that auto targeting is actually going to have more complexity than just throw at where transform is. And that's kind of what I was thinking through in my head. Numpad dot switch to camera view. Framing all selected objects as possible, but does not have a shortcut by default. Nice. So I think we can probably get away with another shapecast if we wanted to. That would be the second shapecast we have on that entity, though. Would different objects be capable of being thrown different distances too? So would auto targeting work slightly differently depending on the weight of the object? You think a good targeting technique is actually pretty hard? You have to consider what is the most likely sensible object to target, closest center of view, as well as priority. Yeah. That's the other thing too, right? We don't have a camera yet. So like this throw, or like the character controller doesn't move the camera at all, which is really awkward, right? That was really funny that the character actually walked up on that box. I did not jump. So I think that we have two options. One that I always like is an orthographic camera view. I actually probably think that that's the worst option. I think we might have to do camera while we do auto target, actually. Like to do auto targeting or to do targeting in a way that matters, we have to have a camera, because otherwise, what are you throwing at? Yeah, ballistic computation is an application of computers. Absolutely. I think we can definitely make anything hit anything in general. So we actually have smooth nudge now. So let's query for, I think, a transform. With a camera. I think camera 3D is going to be the answer there. And we should probably, I think, I like the idea of potentially having multiple cameras in the game, so I'm going to label our camera now in anticipation of the fact that one day I will spawn a second camera. Right? Because it's nice to actually have this and also have the player cam, and especially in development, be able to like switch. Yeah, orthographic is awful for aiming. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, like isometric orthographic. Isometric orthographic would be terrible for aiming. I think I want to do like a third person camera for this. Keep it more in the vein of like a Mario rather than like a Hades or something. Yeah, more Zelda style, exactly. So we have player camera here. We probably want to build a debug player camera system at some point with player camera. Right, so then we have this query. We need to be able to mutate the transform. We need the player, which is a mutable transform. I guess not a mutable transform. We're not affecting the player. A transform with player. And I think this is going to be a runtime error, but I'll make it be a runtime error before I fix it, I think we're going to have to type without player here. But I'll make that fail before we actually enable that. So camera system, I guess player camera system makes more sense, right? And then we've got the query for the transform of the camera and the player. And we've got for mute transform in query, mute query, and also mute query. What is it? Transform dot translation dot smooth nudge player 0.5 0.1. I don't know what the delta is. The only bad thing about the camera is it will no longer be able to see eyes. Well, we'll have to implement mirrors. We'll put the cylinder on the home screen. You can hang out on the home screen. Oh, expected a shared reference to a vec3. Interesting. Found transform. That's because I'm not doing my job at all here. Translation. So that compiles. I think that this has to be in fixed update, not in update, at minimum. No. Is that true? You know what? This exists. Fixed time step to produce stable and consistent behavior regardless of frame rate. Physics simulation and character movement. I think the smooth nudge has to happen in fixed update. Clearly mirrors are the only sensible solution. Yes, fully path traced, please. Oh, not just another camera facing the other direction. Fully path traced ray tracing. That would actually be really funny. Just have like a full on path traced, like hella complicated scene. Like you look into the mirror and you see yourself as a cylinder and fractals expanding behind you, but only in the mirror. And then you have to look away because your computer can't handle it. So let's run this without this first. I think this is drop in. I haven't used this yet. Where is our add systems, fixed update, player camera system? Turns out the game is about you having taken some psychedelics. The mirror expands, you turn into the fractal world. Yeah, so we did get the error that I thought we were going to hit. Why is this taking so long to crash? I guess I'll work on the small bit of the bottom of the screen. Without player. Why is this taking so long to crash? That's so weird. Okay, so the issue is that we have mutable transform exclusive reference query for the camera or cameras, and we have a transform for the player as well for that query. We can't do that. What is going on? Why is this not stopping? Did it just happen to stop at like a really, really bad time? That's so weird. Why did I have to kill that? That's so strange. I don't think I made an infinite loop. Also, if I made an infinite loop, it should just stop, right? I think something panicked at like the exact wrong time. Oh, you know what is really funny? I put the camera inside of the character. Whee! This is a great view of the cylinder, right? This is it. Right here. I need to look at the docs for Smooth Nudge. Okay, Smooth Nudge nudges this value towards the target at the given decay rate. This, if you're not aware, is the function from Freya's like stable interpolation video. So very exciting. Decay rate parameter controls how fast the distance decays. And delta is something like delta time. Oh, right. Why did I not do that? Examples transforms a line, time delta seconds. Smooth follow. There we go. This is Jan's example, if I remember correctly. So following single decay rate, time. Time is just going to be res time. Delta time is delta seconds. And they put this in fixed update, right? They didn't. Interesting. That's really interesting. I wonder if that's a mistake. I wonder if it's just easier to not use fixed update because it'll look chunky or something. And then this translation needs to be offset in some way. Yeah. Camera needs to be offset. Absolutely. I don't know what our offset is going to be. Offset is going to be specific height, right? So no real change in height. Which means that we actually have to do this a little bit more complicated, right? So like with Y2, for now, hard-coded value. The doc for the transform crate, Chris showed, did say that it looks odd at a higher refresh rate. If it's time independent, doesn't matter. If it's time independent, does what matter? The distance? Yeah, so the smooth follow for the camera, when I think about it, the camera will behave differently if it's frame rate dependent, which is what being an update means. And if we put it in fixed update, then it could potentially look chunky because of a fast update frame rate and a slow other, right? Oh, it's not frame rate independent if it's an update. It is also time dependent. Yeah. There's a lot of work to do for cameras and stuff like that. Not pretending that this is going to be a particularly sophisticated implementation in the short term. Let's do like plus. I don't know how far offset do we want it to be? Like 505. This feels wrong. We always want it to be behind the player, right? So we need to actually be getting the local negative, which will be negative z. So we need to do player dot local z times 5. Can you make these variables so you can tweak them in the Bevy variable debug interface thing? Bevy inspector eGUI, absolutely. This can and probably should be a resource. You'd probably want to offset in screen space somehow if possible. Offset in screen space. Yeah, but it's physically in space, right? Like there's a world space position for the camera following the player. I think right now all I'm trying to do is put it up into the back and in the same facing direction as the player. Like right now, I'm just trying to do something so that we can do some auto targeting, which we may not actually get to today, but. I don't want local Z, do I? We want global transform. I guess they're the same thing in this case because they're a root entity. So it doesn't really matter. So to get it to be I think we want to translate, so we can't smooth nudge on the transform then. So we have to implement these separately, right? Is that what I'm seeing here? Stable interpolate for V if V is a normed vector space, which I don't think a transform is. So we don't get smooth nudge on the whole thing, which means that we need smooth nudge just for the translation. So let's just start there. Ignore rotations. We'll do target player transform with Y2, so it's somewhere off the ground. I feel like we should do dot looking at here, but I don't see exactly how that. No, looking at would be fine. But we would want it to change. So player translation with Y. This, it would just give like a random offset always in the same direction. So method, not a field. I think I'm going to go look at the camera control GDC videos after this. It's like a little zoom in. So that's like way too slow. So let's keep it more at like a 9. And let's keep the height at maybe like a 4. Maybe a 6. So it doesn't rotate with the character. It doesn't stay anywhere really. Like if you go back, it's not not doing so hot. But you can see the eyes. So let's do a resource here. Player camera settings. We'll derive resource and reflect resource. And this will be what? Offset vec2, vec3. Decay, F32. And I think that's it, right? Offset and decay. And I will impl default for player camera settings. And we'll get vec3 as, I guess, 5. What is it? 6. 5 is what we're using right now. And decay would be 0.9. And then this needs to be where we get that information from. So res or player camera settings. Res player camera settings. And then this is player camera settings dot decay. Player camera settings dot offset dot y. Plus player, this is not going to be how this works long term, but dot width, player camera settings dot offset dot width y 0. So that gives us a target. This needs to be initialized in our settings. So we will do init resource with this type. And I think that should be good. Unless I messed something up. There's a lot of possible fine-tuning with this stuff. Yeah. Ideally, you'd take into account player velocity and rotation, platformer rules, or you show more of the side you're walking towards. Yeah. Yep. Yep. There's both location of camera and probably a look at method on camera. Yep. Look at, looking at, all that kind of stuff is all on camera. All of those things are true. But right now, we're just looking for this resource. A lot of resources, dang. Let's do... I forget if we're doing settings or config in Bevy repo. Picking point. Why is it not here? Oh, I didn't register it. Whoops. You can reflect it, but if it's not registered, then it won't actually reflect. If a struct reflects in the forest and nobody's around to see it, there's player camera settings. So now we can do like this. Maybe speed this up a bit, 0.99. And then run around. Do I have decay messed up in my head? No, I don't. Yeah, so you can see like it's always lagging behind because of the smooth nudge. I think if we were moving to the right, we would probably want to change the direction in which this is being smooth nudged to shift the camera that direction. But overall, it's not that bad for, you know, very little amount of work. It's much better now. Yeah. I mean, it's much better for like all sorts of things. Let's see if we can, you know, it doesn't rotate, so we got to go all the way back. Also, I don't have controller control input yet, so now we have this, and now we would be like, oh, okay, how do I target that thing? I feel like it has to be mouse targeting. Actually, now that I think about it, I think auto targeting would only be for controller, because if you were on a keyboard, right, you would want to be able to like click here and throw at that thing, right? I think somebody earlier said picking, and I think they're actually right. I said they were wrong at the time, or I said that, I forget what I said exactly at the time, but I think I dismissed it earlier, and I think they were actually fully correct. Nudging more to the direction the player is looking in is probably quite easy to do. Yes. Let's take these settings, 6, 9, 4, 1, and 4. Six, 9, 4, 1, and 4. And then this is our general offset. but the player's current movement direction is what? Input based, right? So this is one of the issues with having input be so specific, right? Because right now what we're doing is like keyboard pressed whatever. Well, it could be mouth with slight correction, like within radius of mouth, so you can be quick, prioritize what is directly under. Yeah. And then figure out some ballistic throwing action. I have to figure out Legend of Zelda, like the new Legend of Zelda doesn't run on PC, right? Like there's no mouse input like available. I have to look into that, see what they do. I do think mouse input is the right move for mouse and keyboard. Like just thinking about this, like just running exactly what it is right now, and I can't even do anything. But what I can tell you is that using arrow keys or whatever is just, it's super annoying to line up that ray. It's super, like aligning this ray on a box just to pick it up like this. Awful. Not a good experience. So I think player facing direction and stuff like that will be interesting. I don't think I've ever played a game like Mario without a controller. Depends on if you count emulation. I think I would count emulation if the control scheme was designed. I think it also doesn't need to be like Mario, right? Like it doesn't need to be Mario or Zelda or Link or whatever. It can be any 3D platformer. Actually, Banjo-Kazooie was Nintendo too, wasn't it? Like any 3D platformer that doesn't run on a Nintendo console would also work. But I don't, honestly, this is going to sound possibly wild, but I think Fortnite is the best option. And I say that because they have the build grid. So you have all of the movement and weapons and stuff on a hand, and then you have where you're looking and where you're building with the other hand. That actually makes, I think that's the best example of what I'm thinking about. Banjo-Kazooie is rare, which was Nintendo exclusive for a while. Yeah, I don't know. I played Banjo-Kazooie before I knew what a company was. It was a long time ago. Yeah, I think the control scheme in terms of what is being done, Fortnite probably makes the most sense. Now, are we going to be cranking 90s with cylinder boxes? Hopefully not. I don't think that's going to happen. But if we're going to do like projectiles and aiming and stuff, I think that is the right thought process. Rather than a day, can you project an ADC for intersections with objects? What is an ADC? Rather than array, yeah. What is an ADC though? What's that Breath of the Wild clone gotcha game again? I don't know. I don't know what the Breath of the Wild clone gotcha game is. Yeah, an ADC is an arc. Can you project an arc? You mean for like throwing and stuff? Presumably. I mean, at the very least, I can. I can figure out where an arc would land and then do like a collision. Yeah, the delay I think has been getting worse over the course of the stream. I don't know why. Don't have an answer. Yeah, ballistic equation. Yeah. I don't know that that is included in anything. It would be super interesting if it was. I don't think it is. I think that's arc as in like the other kind of arc, like the data structure. Oh, Genshin Impact. I have never opened, actually, I've never opened any gacha game ever. Oh, the ray wasn't the issue earlier, Gorax. The issue is the player control here. So like arrow keys give you like this direction and this direction and this direction and this direction, right? And you can have the other 8 directions and whatever, but like pointing a ray at the box. This is actually a shape cast too, so we can make that shape bigger as well, but that really doesn't help the problem. The problem is the accuracy, like the angular accuracy of a keyboard input is just not very good in general, right? And when I think about how I play other games, the way I get accuracy is by not moving my arrow keys and moving my mouse, right? Like the more I move, the more I choose direction with arrow keys, the less accurate I am when I'm like shooting in Fortnite or something like that. So I think the control scheme here has to be mouse input for picking these things. Strafe mode character looks at mouse direction. I think character always looks forward in this scenario. So character facing direction is not actually what we want. Right? Like maybe. I think that's an open question. 50-50 on whether character can face towards camera or not. I think once we get camera control to be mouse controlled, then those two things go a little bit independent. But if you press backwards in something like Fortnite, you walk backwards, right? Like you don't turn around and run towards the camera. But thinking about how, I guess, like Mario works, I think you do run towards the camera. I don't remember. Yeah, like this. If you face camera, Mario will face camera and you can jump towards camera. It doesn't necessarily work for that long because I think the camera doesn't back up for you, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah. The Path of Exile. Is that Path of Exile 2 or is there another new one? Did something get announced yesterday? Strafe is like a toggle hold button. Yeah, I don't think we need strafing though. Maybe. Like we'll look into it. I don't think we need strafing yet. Path of Exile 2. Oh, I thought Path of Exile 2 was like out already. Isn't that where Radiance Cascades came from? I guess they haven't released it. That's wild. So they were talking about research that they were doing a year or two ago for a game that hadn't come out yet. Okay. Wild. I didn't know that. I thought Path of Exile 2 was just like a thing. For the most part, the camera tries to be behind the player, but it gives you wiggle room so it isn't too mechanical. Like, it doesn't instantly react. Yeah. Yeah, dead zone movement and stuff like that. Yes. Yes. I think camera overall, for like a good feeling camera, will take some work. I think we made an important discovery in terms of mechanics today. In the sense that, like, this can't be... I need to change this to WASD because the arrow keys on my keyboard are somewhere else. Key A, key D. It does also feel a little bit awkward, like if the... Yeah, it'll be interesting because it's not quite like Fortnite in the sense that, like, if you're scoped in and aiming in Fortnite, you're like shooting something, if that makes sense, like you're targeting. Um, and it's the same for building. You're still targeting. So I'll be curious to figure out if this for the boxes and selections feels like targeting, in which case it makes sense to move the camera with the mouse rotationally. Oh, I use ESDF actually. When I actually play games, I use ESDF. I use ESDF on a Moonlander actually. So, but I think controller rebinding is probably pretty important in general. Closer to shift control. Yeah. I mean, like, we could do, hey, only rotate the camera like Blender has, you know, rotate with a special button, or like strategy games have rotate with a special button or whatever, and like click and drag and whatever. But I think erroring on the side of more Fortnite-y is probably good, because the targeting feels the same. Not because we're building Fortnite, but because the way you target feels the same in 3D space. Let's get a collider on that little pyramid. We don't have too much time left in the stream, but create cube mesh thing. For entity in whatever, do this thing. Rigid body, collider, cuboid. I think I want to go with try mesh from mesh. I know that it's going to be a little bit awkward in the sense that, like, probably computing stuff rather than just saying, hey, this is what it is probably going to be more expensive. But let's go. This is the mesh, right? Let's do mob001.mesh. Export GLTF. And we'll start our autosave Python script, rebuilding Blenvy from scratch. That's a joke, by the way. Figure out why my Rust analyzer here isn't working. This is the thing that I kind of want to get rid of also. Oh, I didn't put a rigid body on it. Cuboid, dynamic. And when we move these around, we probably change these to be kinematic and handle our own collisions to some extent. Or like when it gets hit. Oh, is it jumping around over there? That's wild. I accidentally hit interact on it. And yeah, now it's attached to me. We do need to do throwing mechanic. I don't know. Is the code useful for y'all if I put it up and don't include the assets? Like, is anybody going to actually look at it? Like, we pick up like that, and then it's like throw at the thing, throw at the wall, throw at the other crate, whatever. I like that. I like that. I like that there's kind of like a mechanic that isn't like shooting things, but is still kind of like combat-y. We'll have to figure out how fishing fits into it. But I think that's going to be it for the stream today. I need to... What do we have? Do we have... Let's do an Emacs client here. Let's start... start like design.org. And... Name of game. And then this is what? Mechanics or something? Player controls. WSD player movement. Mouse for aiming. More like Fortnite. Pickup box, throw box, stack box. If stacking is a thing, then what about grids and placement? Camera control scheme. Mouse based. Player follow. More like 3D platformer. The question, yeah. So there's a question in my head, right? We can either do something that's a little bit more like a 3D platformer, like a Mario, which we don't have the background for, like how does a mouse-based control for a Mario game work? Or we could do something a little bit more like Fortnite, have aiming be a little bit more important, and then the aiming controls the rotation of the camera. Yeah, we can apply forces, and we can just like eat things. That is totally possible. Avian is a full physics library, so we can do any physical thing that we want to. I don't know necessarily that we want to keep everything physical. We might want to take a little bit more control, do some kinematic stuff. Especially if we start designing like special items, right? So you have a box, but when you throw the box, it breaks apart and like a rocket comes out, or like you throw a box, or place a box or something, and it like builds stairs for you or something, like, and that kind of stuff. So we'll see. What else do we need to cover? Targeting. How does the player throw a box that is held at something? Anything else? The whole game is about picking up boxes and throwing boxes. So thematically, this may turn into a moving truck game. But we'll see. Okay, I think that's it for today. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Appreciate you all coming back every weekend. I'll be back next weekend again, as always. And if you're doing Advent of Code, I'll be doing Advent of Code tonight, tomorrow, every day until the rest. Sorry, Bob. We'll be going again next weekend. Have a good rest of your weekend, y'all.